Alright, what's up YouTube? Part 2 on the Cherokee, here it is. The cage is done. The last video came out really fast paced. There was so much information in it and I tried to keep it at 10 minutes, but it's just not gonna happen. Didn't really work. So this one's gonna be much longer. As you can see, it's done. To save everybody the time and anxiety of fast forwarding to see how it turned out, let's just check it out first and then we'll start over in time and go back through the detailed thought process and I'll show why and how and whatever. Other than the cage, this is pretty much how I drove it all around Mexico. So one of the key features, or one of the big motivations for this, was it's gonna go back. It has to go back actually. The key feature is that it has to be discreet. From the front, you really could barely tell that there's a cage. And the windshield that I got specifically had that old school tint strip to hide that top bar. And then in the bottom, there's no visible dash bar through the windshield. The VIN still very clearly visible. Tight. If you've ever been in a Cherokee, they're deceptively small, very small. So like the thickness of this vehicle is really only like the height of a person's torso. There is not much extra room in this car at all. It is very deceiving. It looks like a normal vehicle, but this is small. So to get the tubes away from your head, they're outside the vehicle. So this is a hybrid roll cage, meaning half of it's in and half of it's out, like an exo cage or like an internal roll cage. This is a hybrid cage. So those top bars are part of the structure of the roll cage. And then these rock sliders here that go directly to the frame are the bottom of the roll cage. So you're completely encapsulated by tubing, even though inside the car, the only thing you see is vertical tubes. Again, imagine rolling up to a checkpoint. Really, you can't see much. You come up to the front window and everything is clean. Everything looks normal. Like I said, there's no visible dash bars. And from a driver perspective, you're looking up at that factory tint strip. You're looking at the top bar. You're looking at tubes come through tight to the A-pillar, down through the dash, nice and clean. So looking at it from inside, you could see that this top tube could have been up a little bit higher, but all in all, it doesn't really impact visibility all that much. So this would be like the perspective of the driver, and the A-pillar tubes are pretty close to being tight to the original A-pillars. And the reason this bar is down so low is because the cage itself had to be welded through the windshield. So maybe I could have bent the middle up a little bit higher, but again, diagonals when you're looking through a windshield are kind of a telltale that something's wrong. It's just not typical. So, and then down in the footwell, mind all the wires hanging out, and no kick panels yet, but you could see the tube comes down through the dash and pretty much standard there. So I'll make new kick panels that go around the tubes. Same thing over here. Minimally invasive, not very obvious. And so from this angle, you could see that that B pillar comes down, and where I keep my seat, that tube is well away from my head before it goes up through the roof and then down through the floor like normal. And then same thing with the C pillar. It's back far enough that the passenger in the back seat's not going to hit their head on it. Seat belt still clears, goes up through the roof, and then like we talked about before, hits as much of the chassis as I could possibly get. And you're looking at it coming through the roof with our pass-through plates and our welds. Again, kind of just looking like as much of a factory roof rack as possible. So anyway, that's how it turned out. If you're interested in seeing how it works and better lighting and all that stuff, stay tuned for part 3, which would be kind of the walk around of the total vehicle. So now let's go back in time and see what my thought process was as I was building it. All right, got the Cherokee all ripped apart. Dash is out. Let's take a look at this thing. We've got it to a point where we're gonna start laying tubes, and the point here is to figure out where our A-pillars are gonna come down, and then where, if we're gonna do a dash bar, is gonna go. Are we gonna have it on top of the dash, in the dash? Right now, this flange here comes down, and we could probably sneak a tube right up behind that, and then the dash will kind of curl around it. And then here you can see this little dust mark where the defroster thing came up. So let's look at that. So looking at the back of the dash here, probably a decent angle. You know, here's that flange plane, and the only thing behind it are these defrost tubes. Nothing, and then nothing over here by the instrument cluster. You know, I was thinking that we were gonna have to put the dash in and take it out and put it in and fit it and take it out, but I don't even think we really have to do that. It's pretty much just there or nowhere. So then, the next thing is how close can I get it to this pillar? And I don't mind cutting out all of this metal in here to bring the tube in, but that's gonna be kind of like a Z-bend to not be into this heater box. So the next step is gonna be laying out these tubes. Another point of consideration is all the electrical that's on both sides down here, up in the footwell. Probably a good time to talk about this. Why did I leave the seats in? So that I could set the B-pillar location in a point where I'm not gonna bang my head on it. So this thing here is the headrest for these seats, and so we want the B-pillar to be behind this without, to where I'm not gonna be able to get my head into it in a normal seated position. And so this thing right here, pull this forward, check this out. So when we say things like the cage could kill us, check this out, close up on my face. But as this Jeep moves, you're gonna be kind of like in the seat right here. And look, I've hit my head on this pointed seatbelt thing, boom, right into the temple. I've done it. It's not good. And that's a piece of plastic, maybe with a bolt behind it. It's not the end of the world, but I don't want to do it with a big steel tube. It'd be like taking a baseball bat to the head. Now the next thing is, look at how close my head is to the ceiling. Again, I've hit my head on there, so we can't be like spinning tubes inside this Cherokee. Yeah, you could lower the seats and do whatever else, but I don't want to do that. So that's why we're gonna run the A-pillar straight up the pillar and blow it straight through the roof, and then run them on the top as like looking like a roll cage. Anyway, that's where we're at. That's the decision-making process. Let's get to that next click. All right, YouTube, check this out. We got some tubes in. These are our mock-up tubes. So you can see where it's coming through the roof, and then this top tube's gonna go all the way back. Here it comes through the roof, right down the A-pillar. There's our Z-bend. Okay, check that out. I mean, it's pretty darn tight. And then down to the floor. So these are cut here and here, and obviously up here. That's all going to be continuous, with the exception of this one. And this is also where our door bar comes in. So you can't, at least on my bender, you can't do bends back to back. There has to be sort of a straight section in order to get it to fit. So we figured out the angle of this. It'll get cut and reclocked and then welded. And then from here all the way to the back gate's gonna be one tube, and then from here down through the floor, and then we'll catch the slider going back to the frame, you know, what resembles a frame normal on a normal car, but this whole thing's a unibody. Here is a plated frame rail back to our radius arm mounts. I mean, this is all big beefy steel, so we'll blow an arm off here, catch the tube coming up through the floor, and come right out to where our sliders will transition into. So that'll all be kind of one monolithic piece, tying the cage back into, you know, as much structure as we possibly can. But anyway, that's where we're at. So that's a full day of bullshit. And now we'll pull this tube out, figure out all the bends for real and all how to clock it, and we'll have this as a template, and then I'll cut these tacks and fit it to the other side and do the exact same thing on the other side. Here's a little glimpse on how complicated it gets when you're in 3D space and you don't have CAD and fixture tables to do everything with. This is an interesting setup. We're trying to use the magnet on this angle finding gauge to set this 3D rotating clamp. Finally, I took a C-clamp, which are cast steel, and welded a piece of angle iron to it so the magnet sticks to the angle iron and I could clock the clamp. It saved a bunch of time, and anybody can make that, but I made a bunch of them and I'll throw them on this new website we're developing. We're finally moving from an info site to an e-store. This cage that we're making will be a weld your own kit on here eventually, but anyway, in the products tab, there's a bunch of fab stuff that saves me time and just trying to help everybody out. So check it out if you want them. Like I said, I made a bunch. Put in the order and we'll send it out. It's just something so simple, and you see here we're using it while we're trying to bend the tubes. So much better than those magnetic digital angle finders. Big, huge readout. You can see it from across the room. Made it so much easier to get those impossible Z-bends done, and here they are, done and in. Then we could lift the hatch, figure out where we need to cut the tubes to length, and then put a finished end on them. Alright, so the A, B, and C pillars are all planned out, bent, kind of coped, ready to be put in. And this is the point in the project where you really start to realize what's not possible but probable, and how much effort everything's gonna take, how the metal welds, how much you gotta clean it up, all of that kind of stuff. All right, so you can start to see the overall design. A pillar comes up through the roof, B pillar hits, C pillar hits, and this is long right now, so the angle's not right. So you can sort of see our sight line on all three of these tubes are all the same angle with the side of the vehicle. And then our C pillar's gonna come down and hit on these kicker plates here. And so they'll get mitered and welded on that. So if this were a race vehicle, you'd always see them kind of come down to the top of the wheel well, but usually that's on like a rally car where there's a strut. This line right here is actually the frame, or the frame. Yeah, you could box them over to this, but this is just kind of tinfoil. You can hear it. And actually the main structure is where the seat and the seat belt hits in this box right here. And that's basically as close to the frame as you're gonna get. The way that this thing was constructed, first of all, look, here's underlayment or sound deadening mat that I just rolled the bed liner right over. So there's a rubber layer. There's one layer of sheet metal, and that's the entire trunk structure. So unless we cut that out, it's just sort of a bunch of sheet metal sandwiches. We're gonna weld all along here and then throw our overlay plate and then weld the perimeter of that too. And so it's not really so much about strength. You can see these are welded. Let's talk through them. It's not so much about strength, it's about keying in and grabbing as much of this sheet metal as possible. Even with all of that welding, if you look, you can see that there's multiple layers in there. And so even if you weld the one, I really threw a lot of heat and deliberately burned through to kind of catch multiple layers and then sort of weaved it back in. You know, you could do that with a TIG, you can't do it with a MIG. But man, is it taking forever. And so that's why I say this is the point in the project where you just really start to see what's probable, what's possible, and sort of align your goals and expectations and what the outcome's really gonna be, and roll that back into the design. And all this meanwhile, we still got trucks coming in trying to figure out what we could do to make them better. Customer vehicles, doing things like this is a welding jig to bend radius arms for Land Cruisers, patrols, G-Wagons. We bought a chase truck, so we're trying to work through all the kinks on that. We're just trying to make it all happen, and all at once. This is also the part where you need to decide how on earth are you going to weld all of these tubes and have it be strong, and ideally have them all 360 welds, and where you could put braces like taco gussets or redundant tubes. The B pillar here is sitting at more or less the right height, that cope. And so how are you going to get your torch in there to weld all of that? So generally when you do like a rally cage or something, you build it low in the truck and then raise it and then block it up, block all your body mounts up so that the cage, boom, goes to the roof and still has the support down. Well, this is half in, half out. So my plan is to try and raise this thing up, and it doesn't have to be much, maybe like an inch, just so I can get the torch in there, weld all the way around. From a design perspective, what's gonna happen, you lift the back, your front bars will come forward. And so I think I'll be able to weld the dash bar when those bars swing forward. And then the top window bar here will do the old bend trick. So it'll be tight to the roof, but then the bends will come down. The bends will sort of dive here where you can weld easily, and you know, that corner of your vision sucks that you lose it, but you know, it's fully welded then. Plans changed a little bit here. We were able to pull the front up to get the underside of the dash bar, and then we smashed it back down and raised the back to pull the tubes away, and then we could weld the front side of it and pull it down as far as we can get it so that we could weld all the way around the top window bar. Once the windshield is welded, then you can start locking everything in with the C pillars, B pillars, kicker bars. And this is when you really start thinking you're in the home stretch, but this is where the tedious, monotonous stuff comes in. It's builder purgatory, because you should do all this work and the project just doesn't seem to move forward. That's why I like to mix it up. Keep welding, build sliders, weld them out, bounce back and forth, because if you don't stay excited, the project's just gonna stall and it's gonna look like shit. Here's a good look underneath the truck of how we tied in all the pillars into the sliders. And you can see my lift arms come up onto the truck, and I like to block the sliders up and use those lift arms to set my slider height or my body gaps. In this case, in this particular case, I welded those tubes right to that pinch weld because there's no body frame separation on this truck. So everything just gets welded, everything. And once it's done, you can take a step back and re-energize. The real fun is just about to begin. I'm not gonna lie, I do not want to repeat this again. If you've ever worked with dashboards and vehicles, to me it is the worst. So complicated, there's so much plastic, everything's got to fit right, there's a million screws, but we did it. Cut the back out for the bar, it's done. I'm moving on and I'm not looking back. Even looking at these pictures makes me want to go hang out with the tweakers that are over by the canal. But once you have the dash in, then you can start working on all your tie-in plates. And I'm going to blow through this quick and then go back through slowly. We'll talk about the key goal is discretion. So here's how I really take care to make clean welds and hide all of this. So these are pretty standard TIGged stitch welds. And then what you want to do is take your flap disc and just kiss the top down to make them flush to the tube. Goal is to remove the texture to the level that you're going to paint it. And you can see just how much better that looks once the paint dries. It's amazing how just a little bit of effort takes the glare off, and so it's much easier to hide behind the windshield. Turning our attention to the roof, we have these giant holes in the front deliberately because we had to fiddle with the cage to get everything welded. So we cut these big, and now we got to deal with them. Here's our fill plate, and if you notice, the roof is not flat. There's all kinds of miters and bends, so we tried to replicate that as much as possible, and we started welding. Nice and easy to control our heat, taking our time, but we should have been more patient because as soon as we started to fill this gap and run the seam to the front, all the planets aligned and the panel just buckled. Of course, this being the first one was definitely the worst, so I beat it back out with a punch and a hammer from the bottom, and we're going to circle back to that later. This is a really interesting point. Yeah, we could have spent more time, but look at this. As it's painted, you can't even really tell. This is with no Bondo, barely any care. We did this whole thing in a month. A real build takes years to do, months in a body shop. And for real, let's be honest. At the end of the day, this is the Mexico rig. It's not supposed to be nice. I couldn't be more happy with how it turned out for what it is. It would get stolen if it were any nicer. It almost got stolen a few times. I have a couple tricks up my sleeve to mitigate that risk. But at the end of the day, I just wanted it to be a little bit safer for me because you get tired, you get complacent on the road, and things could happen quick. So I'm gonna call it there. Stay tuned for the full walk around and a lot more of the backstory. I know the format keeps jumping all over, the pace keeps changing, but you let me know what you want to see, what you like, what you didn't like. Check out that e-store. Whenever it goes live, I'll let you know. owlclaw.us or owlclaw.org. One of the two or both. And of course, as always, reach out, get involved. Let's build something awesome. Let's do it together. And until then, we'll see you on the next one.